Assalamu alaikum. This is Ihsan, co-founder and co-creator of the Islamic Meditation Program as well as the Islamic Renaissance Project. In this video, we'll be covering the 4 forms of the Islamic meditation. This is the 3rd video in this series designed to reintroduce you to Islamic spirituality. By learning about the 4 forms of Islamic meditation, you'll be able to take your Islamic spiritual practice to the next level. You'll be able to develop a much more deeper, more meaningful, more fulfilling, and more joyous religious spiritual experience. By not understanding the depth of Islamic spiritual practice and not understanding these 4 different forms of Islamic meditation, we run the risk of failing to truly understand the purpose of Islam and really benefiting from Islamic spiritual practice. So what is Islamic meditation? In Arabic, the word that is commonly used to refer to Islamic meditation or this form of Islamic spiritual practice is zikr or dhikr. And dhikr literally means to remember. You see, human beings by nature are forgetful. In fact, the root word insan, which means human being, comes from the same root which means forgetfulness in the Arabic language. It's part of our nature, it's part of our structure, part of our design that we tend to forget. And hence, the quintessential spiritual practice then becomes remembrance, to remember. Zikr is mentioned extensively throughout the Quran as well as the traditions of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. It's mentioned more than prayer, more than fasting, more than charity, more than any other spiritual activity, more than any other spiritual practice. And the Prophet ﷺ recommended zikrullah above any and every other spiritual practice. In fact, when a companion came to the Prophet ﷺ and told him that the obligations of Islam were too great, too many for him to carry, if he could just give him one thing to do, and the Prophet ﷺ said, keep your tongue moist with zikrullah. Never leave zikr. Zikr, or Islamic meditation, in its various forms, is the easiest and most effective and most powerful spiritual practice to practice or to perform. It's one of the easiest things we can do. It takes almost no effort. And in fact, when we truly understand what dhikr is and what Islamic meditation is, it's about relinquishing all effort, all struggle, all attempts to struggle and exert force in our spiritual practice, to completely surrender all of that and to truly experience God's divine presence. So what are the 4 forms of Islamic meditation? The 4 forms of Islamic meditation are: number 1, tasbih; secondly, tafakkur; thirdly, muraqabah; lastly, murabita. And I'll explain what these mean. The first form of Islamic meditation, or zikrullah, is tasbih. This is what is most commonly associated with the term zikr. This is what people tend to think of when you say zikr, or to remember Allah. They tend to think of zikr, and this is what's most commonly practiced among Muslims when attempting to practice Islamic meditation. Tasbih is basically chanting or reciting the holy divine names and attributes of God, or specific holy phrases within the Islamic spiritual tradition. It also includes praising and salawat on the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Tasbih can be performed as any form of Islamic meditation, either individually or in a group. It can be performed silently or loudly. And Allah Azza wa Jal says, remember me and I will remember you. He also said in a Hadith Qudsi that when a servant of mine remembers me in a gathering, I remember him or her in a greater gathering. So there are many benefits to Islamic meditation, and specifically to tasbih, individually or collectively in a group. Tasbih is usually performed with a set of prayer beads. These are known as a tasbih or as mazbaha. And oftentimes specific words or phrases within the Islamic spiritual tradition will be recited a certain number of times. For example, most commonly practiced form of tasbih is after one completes their prayers. Normally we'll do 33 times Subhanallah, 33 times Alhamdulillah, 33 times Allahu Akbar, and that's typically what most people do in terms of their tasbih, but it can go far beyond that. The second form of Islamic meditation is tafakkur, and tafakkur means it literally means to think, or to contemplate, or to meditate. And this is very different from unconscious thinking. In fact, tafakkur means to think constructively, to think positively, to think purposefully and with intent. Proper practice of tafakkur is the opposite of the unconscious, automatic, negative thinking, the habitual thinking that most people typically engage in, whether they're aware of it or not. It's positive, meaningful, purposeful, constructive thinking that can actually lead you somewhere, can lead you forward in your life, can lead you to understanding, to wisdom, and ultimately to enlightenment. The opposite of the unconscious negative thinking, which really doesn't lead anywhere except downwards. The third form of Islamic meditation is muraqabah. What is muraqabah? Muraqabah literally means to observe. It means to observe or to watch, to be present with. And this is meditation in the most common sense. Usually when people think of the word meditation, they're generally thinking of muraqabah, which literally means to just be present, to be still, to be aware, to develop a higher form of consciousness. Muraqabah is one of the most powerful forms of Islamic meditation there is, because ultimately it leads to a transcendence of the self, to an experience beyond the finite temporal self that we have in this body, what we commonly refer to in English as the ego. It leads to a life in awareness and consciousness beyond that, and into awareness and consciousness presence in the divine presence of God. Muraqabah is essential in terms of Islamic meditation and Islamic spiritual practice. Now the fourth form of Islamic meditation is murabata. Murabata comes from the root word which means to join, to combine, to associate with, or to become one with. And through the practice of murabata, we as Muslims, as believers in this day and age, can cultivate a living and real relationship with the soul of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. You see, the soul is eternal. Our souls are eternal. The soul of the Prophet ﷺ is eternal. And we know in Islamic tradition and in Islamic spirituality, and it's mentioned throughout the Quran, that prophets are alive. They do not die. Martyrs do not die. Saints do not die. Their body may pass on, but their consciousness, their awareness, because in reality they've died before they died, their consciousness persists, their awareness persists. And the Prophet ﷺ said, when a believer, when a mu'min, when one of my nation sends salams to me, in my grave, Allah sends my soul back to my body that I may respond to him. So through the proper practice of murabata, we can cultivate a living and real relationship with the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. Why is this important? Because the Holy Prophet ﷺ is the doorway, is the key, is the bridge to the divine presence. The Holy Prophet ﷺ made Isra wal Miraj. He ascended to the divine presence of God. And his soul is there. By tuning to the soul and to the reality of the Holy Prophet ﷺ through the practice of murabata, we can join with him, we can be with him, and he can help lead us into the divine presence. This was the very purpose and role of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and why Allah Azza wa Jalla referred to him as Rahmatan lil Alameen, a mercy to creation, because he was able to take creation from ignorance, from the veils of the world, from dunya, into the light and the expansion and the awareness of the divine presence of God. This is the purpose of the Prophet ﷺ, and through murabata we can actually reach that much faster. Very few nowadays know about the practice of murabata, even though it was a practice that was conducted even during the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ by even companions of the Holy Prophet ﷺ who were with him even physically. So what are some of the most common mistakes when it comes to Islamic meditation, the proper practice of dhikrullah? Well, the first and most common mistake is a lack of proper understanding of how to practice Islamic meditation, how to practice dhikrullah in its most effective and efficient forms. Another mistake which is commonly made with dhikrullah, with Islamic meditation, is a lack of intent, a lack of consciousness, a lack of awareness. Oftentimes when people practice Islamic meditation, when they make tasbih, or when they even make muraqabah, a lot of times it's unconscious, it's unaware, it's lacking the intent that can truly take that practice to a much more powerful experience. And really what we're talking about is a lack of presence, being distracted by the dunya, being distracted by the world of form, the world of appearances, and all of our obligations and duties and troubles and problems that come from dunya. Being distracted by that and then failing to get the very benefit what Islamic meditation was for, to liberate us from that. And lastly, there's a lack of understanding of the purpose of Islamic meditation or the purpose of Islamic spirituality itself. Oftentimes we just practice these things unconsciously as an obligation, but we fail to understand what is its very purpose and how can I achieve that quicker? How can I experience that in this life before we reach the grave? So by failing to understand Islamic meditation, to learn how to practice it properly, we can ultimately fail at understanding the purpose of Islam. See, the Prophet ﷺ said, 1 hour of contemplation is more valuable than 70 years of worship. In one of the previous videos, we spoke about the experience of Iblis and how he fell from grace and ultimately became labeled as Shaitan Rajim, the rejected, the cursed, because of his rebellion. He worshipped physically, externally, for aeons, for ages, yet he didn't spend an hour in contemplation, an hour in meditation, to realize the very purpose of his physical, spiritual practices, of his religious obligations. And hence, all of his religious obligations, all of his prostrations, instead of cultivating humility, gratitude, consciousness in his being and his soul, led him to pride and arrogance, and he fell. And that's the danger that we run into with Islamic practice. If we fail to address the internal dimension, the meditative dimension, the spiritual dimension of Islam, and only carry the physical dimension of Islam, we run the risk of entirely missing the very purpose of Islam. And one of the greatest dangers is that we can lose complete relevancy of Islam. We can lose Islam, God forbid, ultimately, and it just becomes a form of part-time religion like many other religions nowadays. Islam is relevant, and it's designed to impact and affect and accentuate every aspect of our lives, every dimension of our lives. And when we fail to understand Islamic spirituality, we remain at the mercy of dunya. We remain at the mercy of the world of forms, and we fail to realize our divine destiny. We fail to realize our true purpose on this creation. The result: fear, stress, anxiety, worry, depression, hopelessness, despair, despondency. You know these different negative emotions that many people nowadays especially are experiencing. And it comes from a purely physical life, a purely material life, and even a spiritual life or a religious life that's purely based in the physical forms is still limited to the material plane on many levels. We can go deeper, we can go into a much more profound experience and realization of Islam through Islamic spirituality and through Islamic meditation. And lastly, by failing to understand Islamic spirituality and failing to embrace the Islamic spiritual path, we become poor representatives of Islam. And we see that throughout the world. Many people that call themselves Muslim, claim to be Muslim, yet their character, their performance in the world, the way they act, they behave, the way they think is perhaps the furthest thing from Islam. Islam means peace. Islam means surrender. Islam is a path of beauty, of love, of joy, of compassion, of grace. It is not a path of violence. It is not a path of conflict. It is not a path of war. It is not a path of force and struggle in a negative sense. It's a holy struggle, a pure and divine and beautiful struggle within the self. Jihad al-Akbar, Jihad al-Nafs. And when we fail to embrace Islamic spirituality, we ultimately fail to represent Islam. The benefits of Islamic spirituality, the benefits of Islamic meditation are many and profound. First of all, we can truly represent Islam. We can become living examples of what Islam truly means. Human beings living in a state of Islam, in a state of divine peace. And we become magnetically attractive to so many people because peace is what people are looking for. Peace is what they think they're fighting for. And if we have peace within ourselves, we can then offer it to other people. Islam again can rise from the ashes and become the spiritual path it was destined to be. As Allah referred to in Surah An-Nasr, that one day people will enter the religion of Allah, the religion of the Creator, the divine heavenly spiritual path in droves, in multitudes. We can help be catalysts. We can help be doorways for that day. We can develop a real experience of Islam beyond its forms and truly benefit from our spiritual practice, to truly enjoy our prayer, as did the Holy Prophet ﷺ and the companions. It's amazing when we read the stories of the Prophet and the Sahaba, how much joy and love they took in their prayers, how much presence they had in their prayers. We can experience that too. We can also attain to faith, to certainty, to true belief, and to absolute confidence and conviction, beyond doubt, beyond even the possibility of doubt. Because when we realize it internally, it's no longer forced. Belief is no longer something in the heads. It's not something we just perform in our bodies. It becomes rooted in our hearts. It becomes rooted in our souls. And we become living examples. We become mountains and pillars of faith in creation. And then we become divine deputies of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. We can reach the freedom from fear, freedom from anxiety, freedom from stress and worry. And ultimately, what this equates to is freedom itself. Nowadays, there seems to be a lot of confusion as to what freedom actually means. Many think that freedom means I can do whatever I want whenever I want. And their souls are still imprisoned. The soul is not free. We're still victim to fear and anxiety and stress and worry. Freedom, true freedom, is internal freedom. Internal freedom regardless of external circumstances. We can reach that through Islamic spirituality and through Islamic meditation. We can begin experiencing lives of joy, of happiness, of gratitude, of passion and zeal and love for life as we were meant to. Life is a divine gift. Allah Azza wa Jal created us so that we may live. And we're failing to experience that oftentimes because we've been lost in the world and we fail to understand the purpose of the spiritual path. Islam can lead us to true life. And we can begin living every day and every moment of our lives from a place of confidence, a place of certainty, and naturally attract to ourselves the abundance, the prosperity, the goodness, the barakah, the blessings, the grace that Allah wants for us, that Allah Azza wa Jal created for us and is actually sending to us. The problem is we're not receiving it because we're cutting ourselves off from that flow of divine abundance. So to briefly review the content contained in this video, we covered the 4 forms of Islamic meditation: tasbih, tafakkur, muraqabah, and murabita. The proper practice of Islamic meditation can lead to the highest levels and experiences of Islamic spirituality, and it can take our religious practice to an entirely different level, an experiential level, one where we're not simply just going through the motions, but we're actually experiencing the fruit of those exercises. By neglecting Islamic spirituality, by neglecting the inner dimension of Islam, we can ultimately lose ourselves. We can lose the very purpose of our religion and remain trapped in a false identity in the world, remain trapped in a false sense of self, still limited to this temporal world. And that will die, and that leads to suffering, and that leads to pain, because we never know truly who we are. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said, "One who knows himself is as one who knows his Lord." And through Islamic meditation, through Islamic spirituality, we can learn who we truly are beyond time, beyond space, beyond form, beyond temporal identity. And life becomes a beautiful experience of joy, wonder, awe, and excitement. And every day, in every moment even, we can experience the joy of life continually. We can live life at an entirely different state of consciousness, and that is your divine destiny. And then we can begin approaching our Islamic spiritual practice from a place of gratitude, a place of joy, a place of love, as it was meant to, and as the Holy Prophet ﷺ experienced it. He worshipped and prayed more than any other human being. And yet when he was asked, "Why are you worshipping so much, Ya Rasulullah? Why are you praying so much? If you have any sins, for sure they've been forgiven." And he ﷺ said, "I do it out of gratitude. Shall I not be a grateful servant?" The way of the Prophet ﷺ was a life of gratitude, and not just intellectual gratitude, but gratitude that fills the entire being with joy, with happiness in every moment of life. That's what's possible, and that's what Islamic spirituality, the Islamic path, offers us. In the next video, in this 4-part video series, the topic that we'll discuss is the very purpose of our creation. Why were we created? Why are we here? What is the hidden divine destiny of humanity? And as surprising as it may seem, 1.5 billion Muslims on the planet today, and over 6 billion people on the planet, yet not even a fraction of them know why we're here. Why are they here? Why are we here? What are we supposed to do? Where are we going? And how can we get there with purpose, with intent, with consciousness? It's going to be an extremely informative video, and I guarantee you're going to enjoy it. And I'm really happy to be sharing this information with you. The more that we can understand, the more that we can learn together, the faster that we can reach our divine destinies in this creation, in this life, and the better that we can represent Islam. And the sooner that Islam can again rise and be the living, authentic, spiritual path to enlightenment that it was meant to be. Again, this is Ihsan with the Islamic Meditation Program and the Islamic Renaissance Project. And I wish you the best and greatest blessings of God upon you, your family, your loved ones, your community, your nation.
أفمن شرح الله صدره للإسلام فهو على نور من ربه فويل للقاسية قلوبهم